Black coffee.
This is the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network. Coffee people talking to coffee people about coffee and things coffee adjacent. This episode of The X-Files is brought to you by Kavoya Specialty Coffee, where coffee is always a collaborative voyage. Welcome to The X-Files, podcast from the past with Mark Inman and Todd Mackey. Down the stairs, around the corner, down the long hall, and through the double doors, you'll find the archives for the Exchange Coffee Podcast. Episodes from 2018 and 2019, before we had a studio. We're going back through the archives and improving the sound quality where we can, re-recording introductions, and merging two-part episodes into a single episode. This is episode 5 of The X-Files. The topic is Building a Team from episode 16 of The Exchange, recorded in July 2019. Mark and Todd share their thoughts about who to hire and when to hire as your coffee roasting business grows. And now, here they are, Mark and Todd.
I'm your host, Mark Inman, and with me always is my good pal and coworker, Todd Mackey. Todd, how you doing?
Oh, Mark, I'm doing well. Good evening. Nice to join you. Welcome, everyone, to The Exchange. And this is coffee roaster and building a team. You know, where I wanted to start our look at building a team was really from, you know, the angle of taking a one-man band and one-person band and turning it into an orchestra. And
Sure.
Essentially, first and foremost, ask the question, when do you do this? And, you know, my first, and I think this gets right to the core of talking about things that should never arise in running a company, running a team, the responsibilities of ownership and key management to the employees. But I think one of the biggest questions you got to answer when considering if it's time to build a team, and this doesn't even get into sort of the ebb and flow of the business, but I honestly believe it should be first, is do you have a clear and understandable mission, vision, and value statement?
Absolutely.
And I think I put this here with with a sense, just a critical sense, because no matter what you need within your business at a point, you know, we're asking essentially, when is it time as the roaster operator to put down the trier or hand it off? Apprentice a roaster, bring on sales, bring on administration, finance, back of house operations, etc. But if you can't rally people around why you're doing business and how you intend to do business culturally, with that mission, vision, and values, things can build and quickly fall apart. I don't know if you would agree or what you feel like in that regard. What sets you up to go from let's say a simple company to a more complex company, just organizationally?
You hit the nail on the head. I am a firm believer that so many small businesses don't go through the exercise of creating a comprehensive strategic plan because they believe it's some big corporate tool that people use and it's not really relevant to small businesses. But it's actually much more important for smaller businesses to go through, you know, a mission, vision, values, then get into a short strategic plan and then break it out into tacticals, because you cannot lure somebody good or somebody great, which you should be chasing, if you don't understand what you're doing, what you're chasing, and why they should be there, and if they're a good fit. You know, maybe your values don't align with them, but if you don't have it written down, if it's not clearly communicated, you won't know that. I do think you can take a pass if you're a one-man operation or one-person operation and not have that stuff figured out yet because you may be new to business. But by the time you get to the place where you want to start bringing on people, you need to know this. You have to have this written down because you really need to discuss this prior to hiring somebody, either part-time or full-time.
Sure. And how does someone find themselves in your business if this isn't there, right?
Right.
Especially, I mean, getting to the millennial generation that is now the largest generation active in the workforce and only stands to grow larger. These are drivers for us, right? It's really more about why we're doing it than some of the aspects of what we're doing. And that's by no means to be distorted and saying, well, the ends justifies the means. It's more, we want to know that we're on a path in the incremental towards the grand scheme, the greater impact. And I feel like the path to really empowering a team beyond just saying, yeah, the coffee's got to go out when it's brown and it comes out of that roaster green to brown. Beyond that, you have the ability to empower your team to make good decisions, act as agents on behalf of the company, and really take ownership of who you are and who you stand to be as a company. So I feel like, that at the core is the biggest place to begin. If you are not there yet, even if you're months beyond having the justification from a business standpoint, operational standpoint of bringing people in, take a pause and go through the process of writing this stuff out and wrestling with it. And I would argue if you have the core team, let's say if it's a small partnership, if you have a couple key early employees or stakeholders, people who you're bringing into the business in that really close way, do this together. I mean, what a tremendous opportunity to bring and give shape to that partnership on the next level, then to kind of grapple with these questions yourselves and let the business start to reflect the people who are sewing most into it, Again, never neat, never easy. I think I said something to this effect in our last episode, but always worth the work. I mean, partnership and real mutuality is harder, but better.
Sure.
But moving past this point and assuming this huge cornerstone is in place for the building that you're going to be doing team-wise, from here, I really feel like a critical question, and I'm sure this will spur a great discussion for us, is to ask the question, can the business support from a cash flow perspective?
Right.
And of course, there's always, there's various ways you can look at this. Businesses will either grow and stretch or stretch and grow, right? Depending on how much free cash is there to invest in the team ahead of the growth, or how much, you need to kind of create the growth as a team and then support it with additional help. But how do you look at this from a business perspective when you were growing your team,
right?
And as you survey the challenges, even we face as we continue to experience growth and try to balance, managing the amount of territory that we see expand. How do you look at this from a business metric standpoint? What are the indicators that this small business, when they have what seems to be the budget to support, what are the things that people should feel good about having when they start to pull the trigger on making some key hires?
There's two things that I think are key. Actually, there's probably a little bit more than that. But the two main things is that you get to a point in the business when you're doing it on your own or maybe just with your business partner that you cannot continue to go as you are. Your growth is kind of peaked. You've hit your, nadir of growth and you need somebody to help you continue that growth. But I do think that the mindset change that needs to happen, because when you're an entrepreneur, and I know a lot of them, small business owners, you're used to making a lot of sacrifice, and you're used to, I was the head, toilet cleaner and the head vacuum cleaner guy and the roaster, and, you're used to wearing 50 hats, and you're perfectly okay with that. And you're perfectly okay with making sacrifices to ensure that the business continues. But when you decide to take on an employee, you need to understand that they're not an owner, they're an employee. So they should never be put into the position to make similar sacrifices to you, because they don't have any reason to do so. They don't have ownership in the company. They're not going to have a payout if the company sells. So I would say, A, you have the cash flow to adequately pay for this person. And that includes a comparable wage that's in your area that can be handed out. Saying, well, we're an up and coming company, I can only afford to pay X, even though you're other roasters are paying much more, you're not prepared. You're not ready. And you're asking already too much of your employee. So being able to adequately pay them, A, and B, being able to empower them to learn and grow within the company. A lot of entrepreneurs or small business owners that I've met or come across suffer from this idea of micromanaging due to fear or control of losing either the vision of the business or the main pillars of why this company exists, that if they hand over the reins to a new roaster, the roaster's going to change all the recipes and ruin everything or not get it right. And throughout their training, they're also just pressing hard and micromanaging this person to not allow them to learn, but also make mistakes that are going to be inevitable when you're learning a craft or a trade like roasting coffee. So you have to give some latitude for them to grow and to be a part of this moving forward. And in a perfect world, you want this roaster to act like an owner, have an owner's mindset, even though they are not, that they are so invested. And they do that because they feel like they're actually welcome and a part of a team, and they have some latitude to work and do their job.
Yeah, I mean, that's the flip side of the coin, right? You're getting at is to let someone succeed, you have to be willing to let them fail. Like,
right.
It's one and the same. If you give someone the room and the opportunity to run, things can go well and things can go poorly. And often, at least from my experience, those are both good outcomes, right?
Right.
And the growth that can come out of failure or challenges can be fantastic. I do feel like, I mean, you're absolutely right. Creating, and I even said this earlier when it came to mission, vision, values, to foster empowerment, to create stake in the company. I also appreciate very much that there has to be a delineation in how the idea of ownership versus substantive stake, how these things are communicated. There needs to be clarity. If you're new to building a team total, let's say you're a relatively young entrepreneur, you built this company, and you're hiring your first employees and you've never employed, maybe you've never managed people before, but I think it's really critical that the growth opportunities are clear, that the incentives and the deliverables of a position, your productivity as a roaster, your sales growth as a salesperson, your scope of management as someone who might be handling books or finances or any operational objectives, just to be clear in what the job description is, what that position is worth, and how it stands to grow. I mean, I think that unfortunately, small business and small business within specialty coffee really is no different, but it suffers from a lack of foresight in these ways. And that can, unfortunately create a really confusing position for the employee to be in, which I don't think is fair at all. And I think, we see that arise in the wider culture where there are some really legitimate grievances that get brought up from people who've been really hurt by companies, and you certainly want to aspire to do more, to do as much as you can to avoid that, and to set up a structure where those things are at the core even before you get into the momentum that creating a team stands to bring to your company in the most positive ways, right?
Sure.
Quickly as a business owner, your job transitions so much to just making sure everyone has what they need to thrive, right?
Right.
So it's great to hear where you're coming from. I guess I'm curious too, just to go back to now we're evaluating, when you choose to expand, we have, the cash flow, the resources of the business. Maybe you've taken some sort of investment from outside and now you have working capital on hand, another good time to hire people. Some people would say, well, we're between equipment investments or personnel, right? And that's totally logical. Maybe you're just noticing that your surplus cash flow month to month all of a sudden supports another key salary, and that could free you up as the roaster owner to transition to focusing only on sales or business growth, right?
Right.
But I guess I'm curious. I know classically the early hires in almost any sales organization, which coffee companies are, whether they're cafes, coffee roasters, green coffee companies, etc. These are sales organizations and generative positions, roles like sales, relationship manager, even a slightly tangential like trainers, people that are supporting business growth, more sales, are usually the first positions to hire. And I guess I'd be curious, for young, small roasters in this transition, do you feel that holds? And if so, why, or where are the exceptions to the rule?
You mean, do they hire salespeople first before another roaster?
Do they hire salespeople first before another roaster and stay on the roaster? Do they become the salesperson and hire the roaster? Is it a generative position that always drives this early hiring? Because historically, in general thought, like for business growth, would say, yeah, you always, the sales team is always the one putting more business in the pipeline, and that's the way to grow. I would argue that a lot of these companies are experiencing really organic growth without much like hard push sales effort in a lot of cases, which is amazing.
Yeah, initially.
But is that a little dangerous? So, what would you recommend to this owner who is saying, I either want someone to go out and drum up business because I'm sick of doing that,
right?
Or vice versa. Hey, I can't afford to be standing at the roaster because I need to go out and support my accounts, make sure that they stay with me and get more, right?
Yeah.
Is that really at the core?
That's a really good question. And when I had my company, I would get calls from other roasters asking, how and when do I hire a salesperson? How do I pay that person? Is it pure commission? Is it commission-based salary? Is it just base salary? And, but in the scenario that you've painted here, to me, I would hire the roaster first, and I would continue to do sales, because as the owner and somebody who's still getting a clearer sense of what the vision is of this company, that I'm able to adequately communicate that to customers or potential new business, and repeating that over and over and over again, to where I could clearly document what it is that are, how we do sales and what are the packages we offer and what are the deals. So then when I do hire somebody, they're not having to figure it out when they start. I've got that ironed out. And in the meantime, I've got somebody doing the manufacturing piece while I'm initially being the sole representative of the brand. I think that hiring a salesperson is much trickier than hiring another roaster, because there's not a lot of people that do coffee sales. And I found my best salespeople did not come from coffee. They came from the wine and liquor business. But it took me a while to find that. It's a really hard position to fill. And I would say that if you look at most coffee companies out there hiring right now, they're almost all hiring or looking for wholesale salespeople, because it's the toughest job to fill.
Yeah, and there's a lot of competition in that space, building regionally too. What were the traits that you look for? I mean, when you did start looking for salespeople, or when you looked at yourself as the business owner, what were, like, if you had to list 3 or 4 key competencies for that salesperson, what were they? And not so much why, liquor and wine made such good salespeople, but what was it about that space or those people that really made them great candidates?
Well, I think there's 2 things. One is that if, for a great salesperson, they have to be able to communicate to a wide swath of people and personalities out there. Somebody who owns a restaurant is not going to be the same type of person who owns a bakery, or who owns another cafe, or who owns a grocery store. So you're not just going to be dealing with the personality types that you like to hang around with. You're going to have to cast a wider net. So somebody who is personable to a wide swath of people. Secondly, is somebody who has the ability to learn about the product very well and come off as very well educated quickly. And third, an ability to fight for your brand in a very saturated market. I mean, in most markets in the United States, coffee is getting very saturated. The reason why I was attracted to liquor and wine sales reps were twofold. One was liquor, how many brands of tequila are there on the market right now? I mean, a lot more in than coffee. So if you have been successful as a sales rep for a tequila brand and been able to get this brand on the shelf in fighting out all that competition, you obviously have some skill, or you have an ability to push something, unless you're working for a major brand that throws, has major, perks. Like I'll take you to Skybox at, the Lakers or something like that. If they just actually have to fight to get their brand on there and they're able to do that, that means they would have the more likely than not have the skill to get you on the shelf. Same thing with wine. I mean, the wine industry right now, there are so many labels out there. And if you're able to successfully carve out a niche as a wine rep, you have a talent that will work well in coffee. Now, why it worked for me was I was hiring people that, most liquor, wine, and beer salespeople start pretty young because they're working at bars late at night. They're doing promotions. In your 20s, that's a great time to be in that industry. You're basically being paid to go to parties every night. But as they got older, in their 30s, and they got married and they had children, they didn't want to be doing liquor promotions at 1 a.m. at some bar. So the idea of selling coffee and being, available during the daytime, and they could stay home at nights with their family, became very attractive to them. So they came to me. It was more like, this is a very similar product. It will be easy to learn. I just need to know how coffee is like the product I was selling. So, how is coffee like wine? There's a million ways to teach that. And same thing with liquor. You can find those commonalities, just like the beer you're drinking tonight. The hops that were grown, if you're selling this beer, you need to know all this stuff. It's the same thing as knowing what varieties of coffee are in this blend and how is it roasted. And they would have their wrap down quite well. And I found that they were much better at sales than I ever could have been when I had them working for me.
Right on. Yeah, and just to make sure, I mean, you heard it here, everyone. Take Mark to a Lakers game, and you can sell Olam Specialty Coffee, anything you want.
Sure,
but no, I appreciate that a lot. I do think, I mean, particularly with wine, where it's, man, to find space in wine offer lists at the right places to target, what are seemingly endless lists of potential accounts for the great accounts,
right?
To make those lists at those great accounts, and to throw your elbows out, so to speak, and to find place there, that's similarly difficult to where we find ourselves. So, it's the focus, the tenacity, and all the things you bring up. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, I mean, we've sort of established, when the small roaster can and should start to consider building a team. I guess my next sort of silo for our discussion, and maybe a little bit more open to interpretation in a way, but there's definitely prevailing ways that this happens, is the question of structure. Is there a standard way or kind of a stock approach that everyone should at least consider when they're structuring their organization, where they prioritize certain functions, or even what functions need to have their own department? And it sounds silly to say for smaller businesses, and I don't mean to come off in some corporate way. I mean more to identify essentially what's happening where, and where those things should be owned by somebody as you grow, right?
Right.
Essentially we get back to, and we've mentioned sales, finance, operations, admin. There's a lot of things that fall under each of those. How do you put those together, and where do you prioritize those as you build a team? And I don't mean prioritize in terms of, well, positions in this space are worth more than others. But where do you put them in terms of the priority of adding them to your operation? Because everybody knows no one has bottomless pockets or limitless supply of cash.
No.
You always have to say it's either this or this. And sometimes you have to say, I need someone to do both. I need to split my time this way. Where are those priorities to you? Or how did you look at your company, and how did you look at it and it was good? And then maybe how did you look at it and how would you change it going back?
Sure. Well, I always looked at it as needs and wants. That's a list I do with everything I pretty much do in life. Would it be nice to have a sales rep? Sure. Do I absolutely need it right now? Well, I'm still getting accounts, so maybe I don't need that right now. But I'm finding myself out on the road a lot getting sales, and then gotta get off from doing sales, and I gotta go back to the warehouse and roast till 2 a.m. It would be nice to really, have somebody take that on, because I don't want to work 20 hours a day anymore. So that becomes a need rather than a want. But, I think that the main thing with the needs and wants is understanding what you're capable. I would take my time hiring to find a great person, somebody who would stay for a long time, somebody that I can give enough opportunity to plant their roots in my company for quite a while. And because of that, I had a 1% turnover in the 20 years I had my company. Very few people left the company. But, what I have seen from other people is, for example, on the needs and wants, if you're going to hire a salesperson and you want to hire great people, are you prepared if they actually do great things? I had a client recently who hired a sales rep who went out there and just started selling the hell out of product. And they're like, whoa, I can't handle all this growth. And the sales rep's like, well, you're paying me based on commission and what I can sell. So of course I'm going to hit the ground running hard. I want to make a lot of money. And the company couldn't handle that much growth that fast, and it created a massive problem between the two employees, between the employee and the employer, and that person was let go. And so you have to be prepared for that greatness, because if in a perfect world, you're hiring great people. So if sales isn't the thing where, man, if I took the leash off and they went crazy, could I actually handle it? If you can't, then look at your manufacturing first, because the roaster's not going to I did so well, I roasted 10 times the coffee than you need. That's not how they're going to do it. They're going to be more focused on doing great roasts and learning a lot and getting into cupping and maybe aspiring to buy the green someday. I always looked at, I wanted to hire people that could potentially be greater than me. And I would be very frank with them about that in the interview process. In a perfect world, you can take my job. You can make me irrelevant. And is that a threat to me? No. What it does is it forces me to be much more on my game, so that day never comes. So that I don't become irrelevant, I become relevant in another area as this person's excelling. But I tend to do better when I'm surrounded by other people doing things at a very high level. So I want to feel that pressure of, whoa, if I don't learn this fast enough, this person's going to outpace me. But on the flip side, what I saw during my time with the World Barista Championship are coffee companies that were afraid to train people or teach people too much, because the fear was, well, if they know how to be great, using a barista's example, they know how to be so great, they go and win the World Barista Championship. What if they just up and start their own company? And that's a possibility. And you have to allow that to be possible. The onus is really on you to make it difficult for that person to want to leave. That you've developed such a great company culture that, yeah, it'd be nice to own my own company as the employee, but God, I really like working here. And maybe I could just stay here and grow within the company. But if the person up and leaves, that may just happen because they're driven and that's, in the cards anyways. But you can't let that bother you or stop you from adequately training or sharing the information. And that goes with the roasters. You can't I know roasting companies that don't tell the roasters the recipes to their blends. They'll give them a piece of the puzzle and then they go and finish the blend on their own behind, closed doors, because they're acting like, they have the recipe to Coke. And anybody that knows how to roast or is worth their salt can blend anything that they want. You're not hiding in the big picture really anything from them. But if you're stymieing them because you're afraid of them advancing too fast or them being so driven that they go and start their own thing, you're going to limit your growth and you're really ultimately not prepared to have employees if that's what you're constantly wrestling with or struggling with mentally.
Sure. I think I've always gone back to this truth, but most people define or have a perception of how great a company is or the culture of working at a company by the people that they keep, right? Which is absolutely true, by no means wrong. But I think that there's a ton that is spoken by the people that they spur off, that do great things and that found a fantastic launching point and beginning. And I think that in a business like this one, that has to be celebrated just as much, right?
Oh, it's a great source of pride. I have a lot of ex-employees that own their own companies now that do quite well, and you feel like a parent. Like, I raise good kids. It's how could you not be flattered by that?
Yeah, it's awesome. I think to your point too, and this, even if you might be in a position as a business owner where you're not ready to hire a full-time bookkeeper or finance or some of these functions that you might be doing this. And man, I remember like nights where I would fall asleep at my computer or just freak out because I'm doing stuff that I can do it, sure, and there's a lot of time I had to do it. But to hire someone in to serve some of these functions, to do it with half as much energy over a third, a quarter as much time, and to do it 3, 4, 5 times better was just the best possible investment you could make. And
absolutely,
it's amazing to have that energy around the competition of, I want to be just as good as my best people. This is a great like metal sharpening metal type of thing. But at the same time, like as a business owner, what is the stuff that sucks the life out of you that you do because you have to? And as your resources free up, how can you not only lose that time suck in your week, but bring in people who really thrive, excel, and can look at your business from a standpoint of strength rather than playing defense in those ways?
Sure.
To helping your business grow. And I think that stuff is also huge. The key there is balancing that with that question we asked earlier of, is it essential to start your team building from those generative roles? And I think we've established a couple of reasons why you might not, because of opportunities to decrease your workload, put your own energy back into building the business and sales, representing the company only the way you might be able to, at least for a time. But also looking at ways that you got to also be mindful of production capacities and whether or not the company from a product side is even ready to supply what crushing salesperson like Mark Inman might bring to the table, right?
No, I was far from that.
Yeah, I go back, and this is sort of where I would bring things to a landing, but I go back to just kind of a simple structure, a structure where sales, let's imagine this from the top down, and this is sort of a hierarchy, but we'll flip it. So don't just jump to conclusions as I'm giving it to you. But if we start with sales in the top position, in the widest position, with finance underlaying that, companies here, I'm sure as they're growing and they're starting to ask these questions of becoming more complex, a driver of that is going to be the business they're doing, which is going to require terms. You're going to start having to float coffee to more people. You're going to start having a more critical and challenging ebb and flow to cash as it moves through your business. And those functions of invoicing in a timely manner, capturing and collecting funds, actually having accrual basis records, reading in real time the vitality of your business to make these decisions in the first place. That role is not just we do it, when we have to close things once a month, or even worse, right? This is really critical. These two in this order, I think, sit atop of operations, which I see as obviously just the kind of respiration of the factory, production, fulfillment, procurement, of course, these really core functions when we think of, hey, I own and run a coffee roaster, or I work for coffee roaster XYZ. I mean, this is what we imagine. And it's not any lack of importance or value. It's just how the work of the company works through the structure. And then all of this, I feel like, sits on top of administration. And if you're the type of owner that likes or sees or wants to project the executive type self-image, or you're presenting yourself with a title this way, whether to your team and or to the public,
Right.
I would actually put you and this function at the very bottom of the company.
Absolutely.
And if everyone's following me here, what I'm trying to outline is the inverted hierarchy, right? The upside down triangle where everybody needs you to do the right thing at the foundation, whether that's culturally, values driven, supplying needs both functionally and delivering on your contracts with your employees, and making sure that this whole thing is hinging and is balanced on that single point, to where sales has the production to supply the sales they're closing, to where, the finance team can collect the funds because the relationships with the clients is sound and good, because sales is out there in that more widespread and connected way direct to the customer. Right.
Right.
So, this is where I go. If we've established when to grow your team and you decide to make the leap, this is exactly how I would aspire to do it. And I do think it's easiest, or often easiest, I should say, to be safe, to begin by expanding at that top and sort of, zipper it down to the bottom and create the space between you, the owner operator, and that sales function. You might even find that this structure is a way that you divide your time in the business, making sure that the time is spent relative to the shape, the inverted triangle shape, can be helpful that way too. But I do think it's really important to kind of project this type of thing, even if you absolutely disagree, think this sucks. That's totally cool, but at least take time with a plan and decide as far ahead as you can, what are you going to look like at the end of this hiring spree? If you're hiring a person, or if you plan to fill out the team with 5 to 10 people. I mean, what I would consider for a small business to be a huge expansion, right?
Sure.
What is the objective, and where do you want it to land? Because guaranteed, the only way you'll get close to getting the shape that you hope is by determining the shape before you start. Right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'd be curious your thoughts. Do you agree? Are there things in that you find fundamentally wrong? I mean, true friends stab in the front, so have at it.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think the only thing I can add to that is when you have these, if you've hired great staff, the one thing I think that most business owners that I talk to don't either believe or they don't test it, is that that great staff people have phenomenal capacity for success, and they want to be great. They want to perform. And if you put stretch goals out there, like big, lofty goals, and you let them have the ability to chase these goals, if they actually get there, you have to reward them handsomely for the hard work. And if you are able to do that, you will have amazing loyalty, an amazing team environment, because they understand that you ask them, they deliver, and then you reward. And that system is, no matter what the reward is, maybe it stings a little bit in your pocketbook when you give it, but you know what? They've taken you to the next level, a level that you could never have achieved on your own. So you have to understand this is a family, and you want to take care of everybody equally and give them opportunities. Even if you think, you're unsure of their capabilities, give them the chance to prove themselves if they feel that drive. And an example of that, I have two examples. One is a criticism of me personally, and one is something that I just did, was I had hired people that I just saw potential in early on and didn't know exactly where they would go in their career with me or if they'd even stay. But I kept laying challenges in front of them, and they kept responding and succeeding. And fast forward 20 years, my first person I hired to answer phones and write up tickets, sales orders, and do invoicing became my chief operating officer and now owns her own company. Another person I hired to just can coffee, put coffee in a can and seal it, became my head green buyer and head roaster and ran a functioning manufacturing plant. Somebody I never thought would even know how to do that learned. They wanted that opportunity so badly, they figured it out and they did it well. But on the flip side, not everybody can do that. And so I had to let somebody go one time. And on the exit interview, when I let them go, they said, you know what is it really interesting about you as a leader is that you give people enough rope to either climb their way to the next rung up or to hang themselves. And you're okay with whatever direction that goes. You're giving us the freedom to make our own path forward. And at first, it kind of stung to hear that I was allowing somebody to hang themselves, but it was ultimately a great compliment that I allowed people to go up as far as they can climb on the ladder. And at some point, if they couldn't climb any farther, that was the end of the road for them. But I think that people fall in love with hiring new people and new talent and just assuming, well, we're growing and I need a really good green buyer or I need to hire a top barista. Well, maybe your own people can already get there if you give them the opportunity. So don't ever overlook that because you'll be making a big mistake and it could really demoralize the dedicated staff that you have.
Absolutely. One of the great truths in pro dev, your own and others, is you can never have done something until you get a chance to do it, right?
Right.
And so many people want to grow in the industry and want opportunity. And I don't think anyone even who applies for a job that they have experience that backs it up is really looking to take that and then stay in a static place, right? I mean, everyone wants to push forward in most all cases. So yeah, point well taken. But as always, I will let you take us out through the end.
Well, that ties up another episode of The Exchange.
You've been listening to The X-Files, revisiting, rewinding, reworking episodes of the Exchange Coffee podcast from the past, hosted by Mark Inman and Todd Mackey, and produced by me, Mike Ferguson. Our free use opening theme for this episode was X-Files UK Drum Beat by Ronnie Drake. Our closing theme is Coffee Shop Acoustic Funk by Nick Panic. Here comes your postscript, but stick around for some housekeeping on the other side.
I was really worked up about this.
I
felt
can
like
imagine.
I saw that all of a sudden Mark Inman from Olam Specialty Coffee is here being featured on another show. Is this full time? Are you stepping out? I mean, what's going on? Obviously the emotions of this sort of thing are crazy. So I appreciate you bringing it up. But as long as we're here now, let's just move forward. And
if you enjoy this or any show on the Exchange Coffee Podcasting Network, please consider leaving a review, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and tell people about us. You'll find a link to our listener survey in the show notes. Please take the survey. And remember two things. 1, you can email us at theexchange@kavoya.com. And 2, black coffee is performed by the one and only Ella Fitzgerald.